shut this. All right, and we can get going. I'll do a prayer real quick. Father in heaven, we're grateful to be here. We're grateful for the Sabbath day and for the safety and relative ease we've had today. We ask you to bless us as we try to track the storyline in the Bible and help us to be guided by the Spirit. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Thank you for your patience when we get everything up and running. There was a lot to map out this time, but I want to start in 2 Kings 5. Elijah disappeared. The dude's gone. His apprentice, Elisha, and however many of the sons of the prophets were not wiped out by Jezebel remain. And they're all that remains of the cult of Jehovah. So in 5, the rest of 2 Kings is just going to be interesting stories of Elisha. But at a certain point, it stops being about Elisha and it starts being about the kings. And these other characters show up in it. And so I've mapped out, did I do it again? I did it again, didn't I? Okay. It's going to map out the kings. And 2 Kings is going to have a lot to say about the kings. The northern kings and southern kings were the good kings or the bad kings. Did they last a long time, like Hezekiah? Or did they last not very long at all, like Shallum? So let's read about Elisha and Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, and see what's going on. Okay. What translation you got?
ESV.
Okay. All right, let's do it. Will you pick it up just from... So the introduction is, Naaman is commander of the army of king of Aram. Aram is what we call Syria, but I don't like to call it Syria because people get confused about Assyria. It's this thing, north of the northern kingdom. It's where the Aramaic language comes from. So he's a military leader out there. They stole a girl who I guess was from the land of Israel. And she said to her mistress, "I wish master could come before the prophet in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." We pick it up from verse 4.
Yeah, so Naaman went in and told his lord, "Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy." And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God, to kill and to make alive, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." But when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean."
Okay. He comes with a letter from the king of Aram. He comes down here. He doesn't even meet him at the door. He sends a servant to say, you go wash. Amazing. Okay, keep going. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, but Naaman was angry and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana, the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants came near and said to him, "My father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? Has he actually said to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean.
Okay. Returning the entire retinue to the man of God, he stood before him and exclaimed, "Now I know there is no God in the whole world except in Israel. Please accept a gift from your servant." But he replied, "As the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept anything." He pressed him to accept, but he refused. And Naaman said, "Then at least let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth, for your servant will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to any god except the Lord." Now, Where at the end of verse 17, do you also have the Lord all caps?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Okay. It's kind of important that we name the God here, because they're having a conversation about gods. It is biblical tradition that anytime you have capital Lord, the Hebrew underneath it is actually going to be the Tetragrammaton. It's going to be Jehovah. And anytime you have God, capital G, it's going to be Elohim under there. So it would, I mean, it's considered less respectful, but it would be more correct to actually say, I will never again offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god except Jehovah. But may Jehovah pardon your servant for this. When his master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow low to worship there, and he's leaning on my arm so that I must bow low in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow low in the temple of Rimmon, may Jehovah pardon your servant in this. And Elisha says to him, go in peace. So there's this other thing that's going on here. He needs 2 wagon loads of dirt. Earth. And he runs through that request as if, like, duh, you know what I want it for. It's to make an altar. Gods are tied to their land. And in fact, the story, this chapter actually began with this funny part that we skipped because I didn't think it was important at the time. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was important to his Lord in his favor, and through him the Lord had granted victory to Aram. The idea is your gods are landlocked, and military victory or defeat is the struggling between the gods, which is an interesting assumption to track. We should keep track of that because one of the ways that the prophets are going to wrestle with the destruction of the northern kingdom is to blame it on idolatry and wickedness, so to speak, and say that their God gave them up. And this is actually a really central part of Ezekiel's message. Oh my gosh, I didn't add Ezekiel. Did I? You better get it. Okay. That's funny. Okay. So in order to make the sacrifice to Jehovah, you need Jehovah dirt to build the thing. Okay, he sends him away. This story is always funny to me because we use it to kind of teach this lesson that, like, sometimes what God needs you to do is really simple, right? Like that's how we teach this in primary and stuff. But when I read it, the story that's going on is Elisha being stacked up against his predecessor. That's why we have, this whole 2 Kings is going to start off with a bunch of stories of Elisha, because he has to be measured against Elijah. And Elijah was a big deal. Elijah anointed kings, and he protected the worship of Jehovah at a time when there was a lot of destruction and persecution. And so if you go through these Elisha chapters thinking about how he compares to his teacher, his master?
Mentor.
Yeah, his mentor. Yeah, that's the word I want. Thank you. His mentor. A lot of funny story details click. So where's the bear one? Where's that bear story? I lost track of it. You know the one where he sends the she-bear?
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, just Elijah up. Okay, feeds this widow. My phone's recording, so I'm not 100% sure where it is.
Let's see if I can find it for you.
We have to Google it.
Yeah. That'll probably be the fastest.
Stand by, smash that like button. We only have like 2 subscribers, and one of them's my dad, so I like to tell him that joke all the time. 2?
Yeah, chapter 2.
Oh, boy, I passed it early on then.
So like early, right
Yeah,
after he
yeah,
receives
yeah.
the mantle.
Okay, let's go there. Let's go to Elisha 2. This is such a weird story, but there is something interesting going on. Okay. Picked up Elisha's mantle. Okay, it's in 23. 2:23. From there he went up to Bethel. As he was going up the road, some little boys came out of the town and jeered at him, saying, "Go away, bald head. Go away, bald head." That's weird, right? But here's the thing. In our introduction to Elijah, he's famously hairy. He's not just like a wild man and has a crazy beard. He wears like animal furs. He's like a hairy dude. It's part of his persona. So these guys come out here. There's a rabbinical tradition that this is an insult because it is a comparison to Elijah. He turned around and looked at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. It doesn't technically say he did this because they called him bald head, but like, context.
Seems like a minor thing to then have a couple bears go.
She-bears come out of the woods and mangle 42 of the children. That whole story is 3 sentences. But it kind of doesn't make, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it doesn't make any sense if you don't think of Elisha's stories as being kind of compared and contrasted to Elijah's stories. They're best read together. It's a Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A couple weeks ago, let's step away from Elisha. And do this. So a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how the floor is about to fall out from under us as we leave the third-person narrative section of the Old Testament and jump into the prophets. The rest of the book of 2 Kings and on into Chronicles, it's funny because you get to the end of 2 Kings, like Elisha, he went and had his day, and then there were some kings, and some were good and some were bad, and then we get to the Assyrian captivity. And then there's a reference to the Babylonian captivity. So what I want to do real quick is map it out so that we can see the time period that each of the other things we're going to, like Pekah and Uzziah, they don't have their own books. They're just guys the story tells us existed, some of whom are separate archaeological resources confirm existed, but the people on the ground, so to speak, or the people in the middle of the story telling us about it are these prophets. And the thing is, when you're in seminary, like, yeah, cool, Habakkuk, that's fun to say, but we don't talk about like why that matters. What was happening here? So I want to start back here and just work our way through and talk about why each prophet approaches at the time they approach. And it may be a good time to put some notes up here. This is like a particularly good diagram to have posted because if we don't have this like grounding of like how does Amos' time period compare to Isaiah's, then they're just weird archaic texts. So, from the top, Northern Kingdom of Israel, ruled by Joash in the 790s. His southern counterpart is Amaziah. We start off with a lot of ambiguity. Joel is so hard to date. It is not clear if Joel comes from this period or if Joel comes from a period 200 years later. And I know that's a huge window, but Joel is kind of ambiguous. And man, I always love finding little diagrams and maps and stuff that have Joel like 4 times the question marks. It could be Joel. Joel, as I recall, says a lot about like landowners consolidating like real estate. Like they're building big farm conglomerates.
Yeah.
Which eats up land from regular farmers. Okay, Jeroboam II, he's not really the son of Jeroboam I, who happened way back here, but we call him the second just to keep him straight. Cool. That's when Amos and, in theory, Jonah show up. So what's happening in the world is, where's the eraser? Aram, Syria, is still an independent power, relatively speaking. They're not super independent because all of these guys are dependent on, how would you call this? It's like a tribute treaty. It's protection money. These guys are all paying protection money to Egypt.
Okay.
Egypt isn't what she used to be at this point. So Assyria is stomping around here, causing all kinds of trouble. They've got economic problems in the north. They've got unreliable bureaucracy stuff going on in Nineveh and in Babylonia. It's actually what they call it in the writings. Yeah, Babylonia. And these 3 are like kind of trying to band together, but there's always been kind of a rivalry there. And so there's this idea that these guys think they're safe because Egypt will have their back. And Isaiah's going to have a lot to say about why that's a dumb thing to think. But anyway, in the Jonah story, he has to go to Nineveh, and everybody accepts the message and comes to the Lord. Here's the thing about the Jonah story. For me and my faith, it is not useful to think of it as like a narrative where, you know, it pays to go hop in a boat and go to the land of people who hate you, because they might be cool. For me, the point of Jonah is, one, literarily, he's the anti-Moses. He is called, doesn't want to do it. Tries to get away, can't get away. Mission is a success, resents it. Like you're meant to feel, or it seems as if it is written so that you are meant to feel unsatisfied and frustrated by the end of Jonah. Because Jonah is not on board. Amos couldn't be further from the truth. Amos is out here doing what is called the prophetic critique. He's telling his society what's wrong. Should mention, these guys are northerners. I put them in the middle and I'm now realizing that's really confusing. These guys are northerners. Him, I don't remember. These guys are southerners. So these guys are they're having a new regime really in quick succession here, right? What is this, a 30-year period? And they've got 7 dynasties.
Yeah.
Who's really important though is, it's actually Hezekiah, because he's badass. So Hosea, cool, he's talking about this time. Micah and Isaiah's relationship is really special. Isaiah's remembered as like the big important one, right? He is southern, he is urban, he is wealthy and educated, he is an advisor to the king, and a lot of the first 40 chapters of Isaiah happens mid-conversation with Hezekiah. They'll be like walking around, inspecting the water supply, just having conversations, and Isaiah will just like keep getting distracted and seeing stuff. Micah is from the southern hill country. These are hills, they're not seagulls. He's from a shepherding town, sheep herding town in the deep south of Judah. And Micah quotes Isaiah a lot. They are contemporaries. Micah has a lot to say about the corrupting influence that city life has on the moral fiber of society, which I find kind of charming. Like is from a hyper-conservative religious society in the Iron Age. And even by their standards, he's a little old-fashioned. This is all going a little too fast for him. Anyway, these two are great to read side by side. But when I say read these two side by side, you're thinking, that's 1,000 chapters. No, it's just up to 40. Isaiah is multiple Isaiahs. And we'll talk about this more when we get to Isaiah. The part that is in this era is just the first 40 chapters of Isaiah. So that's the one that counterbalances Micah. The rest of Isaiah actually happens back over here after the Babylonian captivity. At chapter 41, the entire like whether or not you believe that the second part of Isaiah was written at this time, like there are people who, at chapter 41, Isaiah becomes a different book. Linguistic style, setting, characters, topics, everything about it changes at 41. The way that people address this is to either say, well, the first 40 chapters were written when we think they were written, and the rest was written centuries later, and then they were compiled together. The other way that people interpret this is to say that all of it was written here, but he's a prophet, so he's writing as if he were in the future and he foresaw the people coming back from Babylon, and that's what he's talking about. I don't have a dog in that fight. What I can say for sure is only 40, up to 40, has to do with any of this stuff. Everything else, including the, like, you know, his name shall be called wonderful, like all those messianic chapters, that is all set way in the future. So anyway, you got this going on, and a couple weeks ago we talked about the Syro-Ephraimite conflict, where Assyria is coming for these guys, and all of these guys are willing to stab each other in the back to avoid the trouble. That's happening in like the first 10 chapters of Isaiah. So like, there's not a point in the story where it comes up, where that thing actually happens. But Isaiah's reacting to it for like a bunch of chapters right from the jump. And that brings us to Hosea, and the Syrians come for the north. Right in the middle of all this is actually how it comes to a head. The Syro-Ephraimite conflict. Assyria does come and does take these two kingdoms. Mass deportations, mass importations. They literally cannot afford to lay siege to Jerusalem. And so Jerusalem lives to fight another day. Okay. So now the southern kingdom is all that's left, and they have really stable monarchies for 80 years? Like, things go pretty smooth down there. Assyria is always, doing whack stuff out in the northeast, but they're not an issue. And this is the period. We're now ramping up to the Babylonian captivity. The Nebuchadnezzar and his father's civil war is going really well. We'll talk about this more when we actually get to that. Talking about these guys who were around when it happened. Nebuchadnezzar takes an army to march on Nineveh, and when they get there, unseasonable rains cause one of the Euphrates tributaries to jump its banks, sloughs off a piece of Nineveh's wall. Babylonian forces walked in through the mud and took the city. There was no siege. They showed up ready for a fight, and there just wasn't one, which Nebuchadnezzar takes as a blessing from Nebu, the god he's named after. Then, from there, he takes his army. What's the name of that town? There's a town out here where, because of weird geopolitical stuff, Egypt had actually sent a mercenary force to come defend Nineveh, but they left 2 months too late. By the time they get out, what is the name of this city? That's gonna bug me. It's this place where, by the time the Egyptian forces got there to refuel, water the camels and everything, Nebuchadnezzar was there waiting.
Carchemish?
Carchemish, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar was already there waiting. So, the conquest of Judah actually happened here. Nebuchadnezzar didn't ever actually walk up to the gates of Judah and lay siege to it. They took over the holding company that owned Judah's debt, and they did it at Carchemish. At this point, this is such a weird situation because at this point, Nebuchadnezzar finds out that his father has died back in the capital. So Nebuchadnezzar splits his force, goes back to the capital, and sends an envoy to conquer the city. And that's when the deportations begin. Okay, so now after Zephaniah, Nahum, and Habakkuk. Okay. Then the Judahite kings, Jehoiakim, another possible location for Joel, but definitely Obadiah. Why did I put another question mark there? Obadiah is now talking from the period of Zedekiah. Zedekiah is the first, what's the word they like to use? Babylonians like to call them client monarchs. It's a puppet king. So by now, Babylon is in charge. They put a 19-year-old, I think, maybe he was 17 or 19, it's an odd number, that's what I remember, he's not 20. Mattaniah, Babylon renames him Zedekiah, because that's what you do. And by the time of Obadiah, they're an occupied people. Zedekiah doesn't come up an awful lot. He actually, he's pretty cool, actually. He fomented rebellion wherever he could. But it's the first year of his reign where we first meet Lehi. Which is kind of a weird detail. When we're talking about the Old Testament, I like to stay in the Old Testament type stuff. But here's the thing. No, actually it would be back here next to Obadiah. Nahum and Habakkuk and Zephaniah are religious leaders in a relatively independent Judah. Lehi and Obadiah are not. They have a client monarch, they pay all their tributes to Babylon, and the mass deportations happen. Oh gosh, how have I forgotten about Daniel? So as the people start leaving, these other stories pop up. So Daniel is set during this time. It was not written during this time, but it's set during this time. Jeremiah and Ezekiel, they're foils to one another. because Jeremiah is a social services Levite, and Ezekiel is a temple Levite, and Esther is also set during this period. Fully captive. There's a, eventually we'll get to how they come back. And when they come back, I guess in our timeline we're right here. When they come back, Ezra and Nehemiah are going to be a big deal. But the reason I want to set this up in this way, so you can see the big picture, the next 200 years, where all the players are going to be, is this. Once they come back, it gets weird to track again. Because our storyline ends in the days of Nehemiah with Malachi. But there's 200 more years before Jesus. And a bunch of really important stuff happens in those 2 years that's actually recorded in apocryphal texts, what we call the intertestamental period. And when we talk about Daniel, because that is when we think Daniel was written, the intertestamental period after Malachi, but set during the Babylonian captivity period, he's going to be our platform to talk about all that stuff. And that period is this complex. Like, we're looking at 200 years of political movements and prophetic commentaries on those political movements. But that 2 centuries that's not in our canonical Bible, the intertestamental period after Malachi, that is at least as wild and interesting and difficult to track. And we're not going to touch it until we get to Daniel. I don't know when it springs Daniel on us. I think the next thing we're supposed to read after this is Ezra and Nehemiah. We're skipping straight to returning from Babylon before we dive into all the prophets that talk about Babylon. Which is why this, to me, is all the more important. So what I'd like to do, if you're amenable to my harebrained scheme, is actually take my Jewish Publication Study Bible introductions and make an explanatory note about each prophet as we go through, a summary. So that we can at least have it recorded for the thing, but also be able to track what was going on at the time. Oh, we should talk about this first, though. Okay, fine. I called what Assyria did, I called a captivity. I'm intentionally going to call Babylon an exile. It is sometimes called the Babylonian captivity, but we use the Babylonian exile as a time marker. This is now the exilic period. I know this is 200 years out from Elisha, but these 2 events are going to define the rest of the Bible. New Testament included. Modern Judaism is created by the Babylonian exile. The Bible is created by the Babylonian exile. That's why the oldest Hebrew texts, or the oldest, we'll say, complete manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible are written in an Aramaic, lingua franca of Babylon, alphabet. There is no Bible as we know it without this event. So this is the exilic period. And when they come back, which is where 2nd Isaiah picks up in chapter 40, we'll call that the post-exilic period. Which I think is also the Second Temple period. You hear that thrown around a lot too. First Temple and Second Temple. First Temple is Solomon's. Second Temple is after the return. I'm hoping that was what I really want to do is get to the minor prophets, so that we can check out their rundowns. And let's pick it up from Amos, if we can find our way to Amos. It's the really small books that are hard to keep. Like Jeremiah is very cinematic. Now you don't have to tell anybody what happens in Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Ezekiel, same thing. But like Amos and Obadiah. Oh, interesting. Let's actually start with Hosea, because in the 12 minor prophets, he comes first. Hosea is about Israel's abandonment of the Lord. Let's actually do that in pink. Do you have a header there too?
No header, no.
Interesting. Okay, so it's abandonment of the Lord. This is actually, so it's the earliest of the 12 minor prophets to be written, as far as we know. And according to my notes, it's actually the central metaphor is whoredom.
Yeah, so I certainly got that from the first couple of verses here.
Yeah.
Go marry a whore, have a bunch of children, because the land commits a bunch of whoredoms.
Oh, no, this is interesting too, though. We should talk about, oh, dude, that's such a cool catch. Okay. Remember I said the gods are tied to the land.
Yep.
The holiness codes, or the purity codes of Deuteronomy and Leviticus 2 have this idea that when you do stuff that is unclean, or let's just say unclean, it contributes to the land's pollution. So it's not that like, okay, you're a sinner, because like there's stuff in there that makes you unclean that's not a sin. Touching dead bodies, right? Having a baby. There's stuff in there that is not considered wrong, but is considered taboo because it makes you unclean. The basic idea, there's this amazing talk from scholar Dan McClellan, who talks about the critical mass of uncleanness in the land. And the idea is, if you subscribe to his way of reading this, when you do stuff that makes you unclean, whoredoms, it contributes to a contamination of the land. And when the land reaches a critical mass of contamination, you get spit out of it. The land will reject you, and thus the blessings and God tied to the land will just ditch you. Which is actually one of the main ways the biblical authors, particularly the prophets, understand these cataclysms.
Yeah, okay.
These mass deportation tragedies. The people were not lost because their God was not strong enough to keep them. They were lost because they abandoned that God, and thus were taken from their land. And also it feeds into this this narrative story, like the whole point of Genesis was to establish that this is the land where these people are supposed to be. But that settlement, that connection to the land keeps getting threatened by different events of being pushed out or having to migrate due to famine, stuff like that. Okay, next up, Joel. The book of Joel is an unusual prophetic book. Although it contains readings in the form of oracles, announcements of judgment against the nations, and promises of an ideal future, it does not follow the structure of most prophetic books. Where prophets deliver divine oracles of doom, or consolation. Instead, the readers of the book of Joel are asked to imagine a terrifying plague of locusts and its horrifying impact on society and the natural environment. The locusts then become a mighty army sent by the Lord against Judah. As the text leads the readers to sense that human society and culture in Judah are at the brink of obliteration, it asks them to identify with a prophetic voice that calls them on to return to the Lord, to fast and lament. And it concludes with Judah's salvation and a range of passages describing the ideal future in which the fate of the nations figures prominently. Now, this is interesting. Joel is actually going to introduce, we'll say doom, the doom of Judah, doom and redemption. Judah, but he also introduces us to this idea of the day of the Lord. Okay. We have, probably everyone in the church who hears the day of the Lord has some idea of what that refers to. And it is an idea that is, I would say, largely informed by Great Awakening eschatology, right? Like end of the world imagery. The minor prophets, the Old Testament minor prophets, all seem to have a different take on the day of the Lord. It's just a day when the Lord shows his power. Now, some describe it as, a locust infestation. Some describe it as a feast. Some describe it as a battle. Some describe it as a peace instead of a battle. This really funny thing happens. This line that I think it's Obadiah. This line that Isaiah has about beating swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. Yep. Micah quotes it too. And I can't remember if it's Hosea or if it's Zephaniah quotes it backward. So their day of the Lord, so for these two, the day of the Lord is great peace. But there's at least one prophet, I can't remember who it is, that inverts it and says the battle will be so great that plowshares will be beat into swords and pruning hooks turned into spears. Everyone will be so desperate for a weapon. Okay, now Amos. Amos starts out in the days of Uzziah.
It's actually in Joel, the converse there, plowshares into swords.
Oh, yeah?
It's in Joel, yeah.
Cool. I knew I liked that guy.
I've never caught that before.
Yeah, it's honestly, I never caught it either. But Jewish Publication Society flags everything like that. Like quotes are they get their own paragraph of explanation, which is why the same publishing company actually creates it's called the Jewish Annotated New Testament, which is super cool for tracking places where Matthew or Luke are specifically quoting an Old Testament text. And because King James is one verse, one paragraph, and doesn't put quotes in any kind of, quotation marks hadn't been invented yet when the King James hit shelves. Like, you miss it. I missed that stuff growing up, but there are people who do a lot of good work for catching that stuff. Okay, Amos has a couple of interesting features. Yes, prophetic critique. Yes, the maladies of the nation. But it has a couple of other interesting properties. One is that line about how it says, the Lord will do nothing save he shall reveal the secret, I think is what King James says, to his servant the prophet. Okay. Human inclusion. boy, I don't think we're going to get through all these tonight. Check this out. In the ancient world, a king has a court. And there's a throne, and there's all these other thrones for all of the like lords and nobles, right? The members of the council that serve. Now, it is believed by everyone but the most hardcore of evangelicals that the ancient people of Israel believed that heaven worked this way too. And so God exists, but whatever species God is, there's a bunch of those guys who make decisions with God. And they are the divine council. They could be the other gods, we don't know. The point is, this is why at the beginning of Job, the sons of God, God-type dudes, were hanging out in God's presence when the Satan shows up. So the king is going to have two important court dudes. A Satan, adversary, fact checker, is really the way this is being used. And a messenger. The messenger, from a Eurocentric view, the messenger is not very important. It's a kid with a bowl haircut who says, "Thus saith my Lord," and reads a scroll and gets shot. In the ancient world, the messenger is the king abroad. He's an envoy, a diplomat. This person will have authority and possibly like a signet ring or a garment from the king that allows them to go into foreign lands with the king's full authority. This guy writes checks and starts fights and signs treaties that the king will back up 100% because he's the most trusted guy to the king. And in Amos, when it says, "Surely the Lord will do nothing until he reveal his secret to his servants, the prophets," Amos is taken to the heavenly council and made a messenger role. He's not sat down in front of God and told what he will do. He is brought into this process of saying, well, what are we going to do about these guys? And keep in mind, whatever we decide, you've got to make it happen, you little human. And that's the narrative. That's what he's talking about. In order to have a dude show up in God's council and have a conversation with divine beings like that, normally we're talking seriously apocalyptic literature. Like dudes turning into angels. We're talking Daniel fighting seven-horned beasts and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. This is unusual to have this show up in one of the minor prophets. The other thing that's kind of cool is the "I have a dream" speech quotes Amos. It's quotable. Okay, I do think we have time for one more. Figures it would be Obadiah. The shortest book in the Bible, containing 291 Hebrew words. Now, wait a minute. What a time jump. Okay. Destruction of Jerusalem. So we've jumped forward a couple centuries. And he condemns Edom. Obadiah condemns Edom. Edom is around about here. Ancient perennial rivalry between these people groups and this one. And if I'm remembering right, I believe if we fast forward another 6 centuries, this ethnic group is where Herod comes from, which is why it rankles all the more that, you know, he's the guard dog with Caesar holding the leash. But I'm way ahead of myself. 500 years ahead of myself. Also, side note, this is just the kind of stuff that only I find interesting, but I'll include it. The oldest manuscripts of Obadiah were a lot shorter. So it's only 290 something words now.
What was
But
added to, huh?
apparently that's the expanded the director's cut, I guess. Amazing. Okay. That's our time. But I really want to get to what's going on with these guys, so I'll do that next time. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for prepping.